Hey guys, this is Sports with John. Like I promised, I am back with another video covering the rest of the major signings that happened in the first day of free agency today. And there's one absolutely huge signing that I'm so surprised about that happened right after I filmed the last video, but I am not going to talk about it until this intro is over. It's the moment we have all been waiting for. Johnny Gaudreau was finally signed, and no, it was not by the Calgary Flames. In fact, it wasn't by the Philadelphia Flyers, it wasn't by the New Jersey Devils, and it wasn't by the New York Islanders. I was absolutely shocked that the Columbus Blue Jackets were the ones that signed Johnny Gaudreau. You see, the Islanders are in a interesting stage because they were contending for a Stanley Cup. They made it to the semifinals 2 years in a row, but then things kind of fell off a cliff. The Flyers are in a perpetual state of meh. They'll do fine some years they'll explode and play really well, and then other years they'll be the worst team in the league. The Devils, though, are coming out of a rebuild. I thought that was the best destination because they're coming out of a rebuild. They've got some young players such as Jack Hughes, and a roster that could be ready to contend, and they're, like, with Johnny Gaudreau, they could be contending. Now that they lost out on Gaudreau, they're still only, 2 years away from making the playoffs. So, I was surprised that Gaudreau didn't target one of those three teams, because they're so close to where he grew up, which is in New Jersey itself. So even if he didn't end up going to New Jersey, then he could have gone somewhere close by. But instead, Columbus? So I just finished looking it up. And Columbus is a 8.5-hour drive from Newark, New Jersey. That is absolutely crazy that he would pick a team so far away when he could have gotten the options of being so close. And I think the most shocking part is that he didn't even fulfill his full value. He seemingly took a pay cut to play with Columbus. I mean, what? I am so lost. You'd think that the only reason he'd go to Columbus would be because they paid him a ton. They're offering absolute millions of dollars, so he might as well get the money. But instead, he didn't even take that big of a contract. I bet you all three of New Jersey, New York Islanders, and Philadelphia were all offering more money. So this absolutely shocks me. Even Calgary, they couldn't afford it the same way, but they are in a winning position. I thought that was the best destination for Johnny Gaudreau because they are in a winning stage. They could win a Stanley Cup depending on the roster they get. They need a couple more pieces, but they're almost there. So the fact that they just lose all that, Gaudreau would leave. And now I think he's going to drop in production because his only suitable player on the team to work with is Patrick Laine. And even him, he's fine, but Matthew Tkachuk is a better option. And keep in mind, you've also got Elias Lindholm, Sean Monahan, even Milan Lucic. You've got a fair group of players in Calgary. I'm not sure what's going to happen now, given that Johnny Gaudreau has left. But maybe Matthew Tkachuk will be traded. But I think the Flames will just go in and sign Kadri. Maybe not quite Gaudreau, but he's still pretty good. So then the Flames are they're saying, hey, we've got a solid roster. We'll be contending for playoffs. Well, the Columbus Blue Jackets are there thinking, where are we exactly? Maybe we're coming up from a rebuild, but they still don't have the group of young players like most teams do. So I do not get this move whatsoever. But the one thing that does go for him is that he's in a really weak division now, like he wasn't with Calgary. Edmonton's good, but besides that, who else do you have? And it's in the same position, because given NHL playoff rules, you need 3 teams from each division and then 2 wildcard teams, which means at least 3 teams from his division need to make the NHL playoffs. And there's two teams already set for it. Carolina and New York Rangers. Both of them are basically already clinched the playoffs because they are way ahead of the rest of their division. But after that, you've got New Jersey, ironically, and New York Islanders, and Philadelphia Flyers, the three teams he turned down, still don't get that, and obviously Columbus. So you've got a bunch of teams that are mediocre, but none of them are going to be amazing, but one of them has to make it. Now you've also got Pittsburgh and Washington, which are always the two best bets to make it if those teams don't. But both of them are aging quite a bit. Washington hasn't seemingly made a signing, which they need, because Nicholas Backstrom's likely to miss the whole season. Pittsburgh's bringing back their players, but they're all older and injury-prone. So neither team is the team they once were. So it will be interesting to watch this division, because one of the teams has to make it, so we'll see which team does. Speaking of Carolina, the team I had doubts about, but apparently I was extremely wrong. When Carolina was lowballing Nino Niederreiter, who's still free agent, and Vincent Trocheck, who signed with the Rangers, I was sitting there thinking, why the heck are they doing this? Because they're solid players, and they don't seem to be going after any other players. But they end up getting Max Pacioretty for pennies on the dollar. In fact, not even that. Hey, pennies on the dollar. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, the deal that he managed to get. It was future considerations for Max Pacioretty. I mean, great on them. It's just a cap-dumping move for Vegas. And they're really starting to feel the effects of the Jack Eichel trade now, because you've got some other players that are getting up there in age, but have expensive contracts. So it makes sense to unload a couple of them. But Pacioretty they traded for from Montreal a couple years back. It makes no sense to me that they would go and trade him over a couple of the other players they could have traded, such as Alec Martinez or Jonathan Marchessault even. I think Pacioretty is far better than both of them. And also they went and re-signed Riley Smith right after that, who he's fine, but he's not an amazing player on the Vegas Golden Knights. So I would have picked Pacioretty over him as well. So even if he cost a bit less, I would have gotten rid of Alec Martinez and Jonathan Marchessault before I would have gotten rid of Pacioretty. So I don't quite get this move. It's really weird that they would configure it this way. I know Vegas needs to get rid of a player with a massive contract, but for so cheap, you'd think they could have gotten at least a bit in return. So we'll see Vegas. I think Jack Eichel is going to start playing like his former self again, so extremely good. But aside from that, you're now missing other players to surround him. Yes, you've got Mark Stone, who's still really good. And you've got Pietrangelo on the defense, but Jonathan Marchessault's fine, but he's not great. And all their other players are getting up there in age. So I'm not so sure what this Vegas team is planning on actually doing. The Colorado Avalanche have done an extremely good job at keeping their Stanley Cup winning team together. Yes, they're likely to lose Nazem Kadri, but you gotta cut your losses. And they did lose Darcy Kemper, but in exchange they managed to get Alexander Georgiev, a younger goalie with plenty of potential. So that makes perfect sense to me. And they managed to re-sign Valery Nichushkin a couple days ago. And now, today, they managed to re-sign Josh Manson and Artturi Lehkonen. So they have now brought back basically all their players. They're missing a couple still. Alexander Burakovsky went to Seattle. But besides that, they have got pretty much their whole core together. So they might not be contending like they were this past year, but they're still in Stanley Cup contention. And good on them, because some teams, they get robbed of all their free agents, and they're never the same after that. But I think the Avalanche have done a very solid job of keeping this team together. They're still missing a couple pieces, but they've done an extremely good job. I think one free agent signing could replace most of the production Kadri had, and then bam, you've got the same team, basically. Another team that will still be contending next year is the St. Louis Blues. They have lost a couple free agents, but they managed to re-sign Nick Leddy, which is a great sign for them. They got him on a good deal, and he's a solid defenseman. He might be getting up there in age, but he's still a solid defenseman on that team. The whole team's getting up there in age, and they're going to struggle with that a couple years' time. But they've done a good job of extending their playoff period for as long as they can. So even if in 5 years' time, then they're rebuilding, then at least they had a good go of it. And that's sort of what the Chicago Blackhawks have done as well. I don't get why they trade away their young, amazing players. It'd be like if the Blues went to trade away Jordan Kyrou. It makes no sense to me, and I made videos about both Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Dach being traded. Feel free to check them out. I'll be leaving links in the description. But even still, the Blackhawks did manage to win multiple Stanley Cups with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. I think they kind of went through that period a couple of years ago is the biggest issue. They came out of the rebuild a bit, managed to get DeBrincat and Kirby Dach, and they built themselves a solid team, and now they're trading away their young players. That doesn't make sense to me, but they did get as good as they could, and managed to squeeze as many Stanley Cups out of the period with Kane and Toews as they could. So great on them for that. Just now I don't quite understand. And I'm even more puzzled now because the Chicago Blackhawks went and signed Max Domi. Now, this does not make sense to me, because if the Chicago Blackhawks were rebuilding, wouldn't it make sense to go for their youngest players? Oh wait, they trade all of them away. But in all reality, they even let Dylan Strome walk. He's a restricted free agent. I make no sense. This makes no sense to me. Absolutely no sense. Anyways, why would they sign an older player? I know he's 28, but he feels like he's in his mid-30s. It's weird. He's played so many games, been on so many teams. But in all reality, he's still getting up there in age. So why would they sign a player that's getting up there in age when they're a rebuilding team? And why haven't they traded Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews away yet? And even Seth Jones. It sounds like Seth Jones might be looking for a trade as well. Because he's sitting there thinking, hey, I'm stuck on this team with no other good players. If Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews get traded, I'm the only mediocre player on this team. And hey, I'm 29. I'm not going to live forever. So I don't get what the Chicago Blackhawks are doing exactly. It's not even like Kirby Dach requested a trade, and yet they still traded him. Again, check out the videos, links in the description. I'm still just as puzzled as I was, but now I'm even more puzzled with Max Domi coming. So I don't get what the Chicago Blackhawks Grandmaster plan is here, but they've got to have some kind of plan, right? But for now, this was the first day of free agency, and you've got a couple good players still left on the market, such as Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Klingberg, but both will likely be signed in the next couple of days. But for now, thanks for watching.